Anyone who's anyone in this community has been speculating what kind of visa is Prince Harry actually on in America. Well, I'm going to go through some of the court transcripts with DC lawyer John Witherspoon here. Did it actually confirm that Prince Harry is on a diplomatic visa? Hey up everyone, it's me, Stef, the alternate, your nerdy alternative, and welcome to another dose of the Daily Nerd, where I break down the royal news and gossip of the day that's pretty much got me eye. And oh my goodness, yes, let's jump into it with DC lawyer extraordinaire John Witherspoon. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel and coming back to the fans, because oh my goodness, they loved you in the previous videos when we discussed the Archwell Foundation delinquency notice a couple of weeks back. So of course, I had to bring our John back for the court transcripts that have now been released in full at a more reasonable price. And so, yeah, let's jump into this part, because a lot of you guys believe that Hazard is on a diplomatic visa, right? And so when you read through this court transcript and you see Class A visa, that's another term for diplomatic visa, guys, just to let you know. Now, Mr. Dewey turns around and says, look, the Class A visa, unless it were the king himself, wouldn't permit work. And we know the Duke is working here. If that was the case, there would be a pretty substantial red flag there. And so there's a diplomatic note that's required to get the visa. And that is a note that says he's coming over because he's a diplomat. Now, for those that want to follow this and have the full court transcript, we're going from page 46 here. And so, look, he then turns around and says, look, he's coming over because he's travelling on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen to meet the President and do good work. We would submit that note is not actually going to be covered because it's not solely part of the visa issuance or refusal process. So our submission was, whatever the interest in the do I have a diplomatic visa or not, there is privacy interest in, am I here as a diplomat? Am I here on behalf of His Majesty the King? I would think that would be an appropriate question to be put to the government in the abstract. And so then the judge is like, look, let's talk about the possibility, hypothetical situation, that the judge could have entered on a diplomatic visa and then applied for a different visa. So like a non-diplomatic visa, where he now has time, he's here, he says, you know what, I've decided I want to stay. And he says, but I'm probably not going to be a diplomat anymore and I want to be a regular old visa entrant. And so then the response is, look, that's a technical matter. He could apply for another visa. We'd go back to, we think, the diplomatic note. There would be something in the Department of Homeland Security file reflecting that status. I can't point you to a case, but we would submit there's no privacy interest. But then the judge says, look, it means that there's at least this possibility. If he doesn't have a diplomatic visa on the 14th of March 2020, he's applying not as a diplomat and he has to check the box and get a waiver, and that takes some time. But if he has a diplomatic visa at that point and enters, hypothetically applies for a waiver, then the lengthy process your experts talk about isn't something that has to happen on March the 14th. It just has to happen before his visa converts to a different visa. And so here, the judge is like, look, do you know what? I'm going to seriously consider two options here. Either he's on a waiver or he's on a diplomatic visa. But the way that I'm reading this is that if he does have a diplomatic visa, but then still had to get a waiver on top of that or mixed in with that or whatever, that he must have got preferential treatment because of the timings of it all. Like, when you read all of that, that's what I'm getting out of it. When you're reading all of that, what are you getting out of that? What are you interpreting it as, what the judge is actually saying and what he thinks to it all, John?
Well, Steph, my interpretation of it is very similar to yours. I think the biggest thing is, again, you have to remember what we're trying to do here, or what Heritage Foundation is trying to do, what they're asking the judge to do is to say, hey, look, we want to make sure that the United States government is doing its work and conducting its affairs in the appropriate way. we're asking to make sure that everything is on the up and up, everything is above board and being handled properly. The takeaway from what you just talked about, Steph, is that this is really a strange set of circumstances, especially in light of the part where you talked about the fact that the reason that they left Canada in the first place was that the Queen had said to them, you know what? The British government is no longer going to provide you with the highest level of security in Canada. And at that point, they turned around and said, okay, fine, we're going to get out of Canada. We're going to go down to California. If that's what happened, and let's assume that he was on a diplomatic visa when he was in Canada, it seems like it would have been a very, very quick turnaround for him to then get into the United States on either a diplomatic visa or another type of visa and have all of those pieces fall into place as quickly as they did. So again, the big picture here, which I think is what's important, is that this is so complicated that we want to make sure that everything was done correctly. And that's what Mr. Dewey and the Heritage Foundation are really asking for, it seems to me.
Yeah, and this is the thing, guys, and I've said it before on this channel. I've recently helped a friend try and get through the visa process so that they could actually enter the United States. They got rejected on the ESTA, so they had to go through the full-on visa process, similar to Prince Hazard, because those two questions that the Heritage Foundation want to really know how he answered, they were on that visa application my friend was going through, right? Now, let's put it this way, okay? It took pretty much a day to go through 3 applications. The first one was the main visa application. The second one was the application then for the nearest US consulate, which for my friend is London. And then the third one was to get a copy of the criminal records, right, from the local police station. Okay. Now, the next available appointment to see the US consulate to hopefully get this visa granted is in September. You're talking about just over 4 months away. Now, in terms of when you go through this court transcript, it does go through this notion that, you know, when you go through a particular visa process, you need to see someone needs to see you, you need to be interviewed, this, that, and the other, right? So if it takes my friend 4 months to have to see someone, how could it, in this particular scenario, this, you know, hypothetical situation, be only a matter of days, essentially, for Hazza then to see someone in that kind of scenario to then be entered into the United States? Automatically at that point, he's already got then preferential treatment. Why then at that stage? Do you see where I'm coming from, John?
Absolutely. And I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that phone calls were made and they said, hey, Prince Harry wants to get in the United States. Let's, you know, let him jump the queue somehow. Let him jump the line in terms of getting into the consulate, wherever it was, presumably in Canada, to allow him to, you know, get through the process a little bit faster. I mean, you know, he is, or he was at the time, I don't want to call him a royal. He was a near royal, or a non-working royal. I mean, the terminology is nuanced, certainly, about his status in the royal family. But I don't think it's impossible that he would have been able to jump the queue or been told, hey, you know, the office closes at 5 o'clock. You come in at 5:15. We'll talk to you, whatever you need to do. Or, you know, it's possible that, as the transcript points out, that he could have started the ball rolling on this process before he even left the UK, before the two of them moved from London over to Canada. So there are a number of possibilities here, and not all of them involve some sort of, you know, unsavory behavior or foul play or preferential treatment in that regard. But I do think that there's something about it that is a little bit odd. Even if he was allowed to jump the line and get an interview with a consular officer in Canada before he came down to the United States, to have that turned around in 2 weeks, it does still seem like a bit of a stretch. It does seem like a bit of a stretch.
Absolutely, John, because when I went to the US consulate and asked, look, can we actually expedite this meeting because of, certain reasons, X, Y, Z, they turned around and they said, look, we'll only expedite essentially a meeting, an interview in 2 scenarios. A, it's for a funeral, or B, if it was for emergency medical purposes. Now, to my knowledge, Hazza was not going to California, US to attend a funeral. To my knowledge, Hazza was not entering the US for emergency medical purposes. So the fact that it was turned around within a matter of days, a couple of weeks, to me, automatically, opinion, conspiracy theory, whatever, screams preferential treatment. At the very least, you could turn around and say, look, something's not wrong with this picture. Because if it was anyone else, do you think they would get that kind of treatment? Reasonably, I would turn around and say, hell no, right?
Right.
And so, the scenario here is, look, the court is seriously considering if he's actually on a diplomatic visa, guys. But with that being said, stay tuned for the next video because in the court transcript, does it actually show that Hazza's already breaking the visa law right now whilst he's actually in California breathing and, looking after the children and being with Megzi and whatever else he's doing, who knows? Well, stay tuned and make sure you don't want to miss that video. You subscribe to join our alternate tribe, like, share, comment, all of that good stuff. And until the next one, guys, laters.